Desert High, Episode 3, Trona versus Desert, Take 3. Welcome to Desert High, Behind the Scenes with the author, that's me. This is Episode 3, Desert versus Trona. Desert High is a book that I wrote about high school football and time travel. In a way, it's like Back to the Future meets Friday Night Lights, and on the set of The Right Stuff. You see, if there was ever a time machine invented, the Air Force would probably be the ones who would use it. You know, the government, of course. And Edwards Air Force Base is the center of test flight. It's located in the Mojave Desert, and there's a public school there. A bunch of people live there on this Air Force Base. It had a commissary, a BX, and a library, and elementary schools, a junior high school, and a high school, Desert High. And so this is the setting where Desert High takes place. One thing I wanted to point out about the cover, you can see on this stream through this contrail. That is a picture of the XB-70 flying over Edwards. The XB-70 was this giant white supersonic plane that was super high tech, and the day it crashed was like the JFK assassination. Anybody that was around remembers exactly what they were doing when the XB-70 went down. And I had to have a picture of the Joshua Tree, which kind of epitomizes the Mojave Desert. And this particular photo just happens to have one of the biggest flight testing airplanes in the background of the photo, which is kind of cool. Desert High. This is a book that I had to write. It's a story that had to come out. The high school, Desert High, that I went to, me and my buddies, we played football. And our senior year, in November of 1980, we went to the playoffs. We were in the first round of the playoffs, and we were playing the Mammoth Huskies. We played this game at Bishop High School on Bishop Mountain, which was another ski resort in the Sierra Nevadas. And what happened in this game was horrific. We got ripped off. It was horrible. A lot of athletes will tell you they got ripped off, but listen to my story. And then listen to what I have to say about what the referees did after the game. So at the end of the game, Desert was ahead. Mammoth had driven down through a long pass inside the 10. We were holding them to a goal line stand, and they ran 2 plays at the end of the game in 6 seconds. If you know anything about football, you know that that's impossible unless you have an incomplete pass, an out-of-bounds play, an injury timeout, a timeout by one of the teams, or an official timeout. You don't stop the clock. The clock just keeps on running, baby. And they were able to run 2 running plays in 6 seconds. And then, the very last play of the game, Mammoth ran a quarterback sneak, and we stopped him. And I swear some of us players remember hearing a whistle. But their quarterback threw the ball into the end zone, kind of like a basketball player inbounds an inbound pass. Using both hands, he thrust the ball into the end zone. One of my best friends, Pat Zhang, saw the ball coming to him, and he bats it down, thinking, oh, incomplete pass, game over. But an offensive tackle for Mammoth jumps on the ball. The referee raises his hands. Fumble recovery in the end zone for a touchdown. Now, it's been decades later. I'm still not over it. I still get goosebumps telling this story. A lot of athletes will moan and complain and say, oh, we got ripped off. It's the ref's fault. It wasn't my fault. But the referees met with our coach, Leroy Matthews, the Tuesday after the game and said, we blew these calls. We're sorry. And like I said, we are still not over it. Whenever me and my buddies get together, we're bringing up this game. Dusty Wentz, the quarterback for our team, he told me that 2 things. After the game, Troy Rowan, the running back for Mammoth, he said he apologized. I'm sorry we had to use that trick play on you. We were desperate. He had met Troy the summer before at a basketball camp, so they were kind of friends, and after the game they talked. And Troy Rowan admitted to cheating. I decide to go back into time to fix this game because the Air Force invents a time machine. My brother-in-law, who happens to work at Edwards Air Force Base, is working on this project, and the Air Force decides they need a guinea pig who will go back in time and change a small, insignificant event like a high school football game and see what happens, and see how it plays out with the time-space continuum. So I decided to go back to try to change that game, because if I had a time machine, that's what I would do. If anybody ever asks you, hey, if you had a time machine, do you know what you would do with it? I do. I'll step to the front of the line because I've got a plan of action. And my plan of action is to go and reverse that game. My friend Dusty Wentz, he said that the reason he actually played junior college football is because that game left such a bad taste in his mouth. He did not want that to be the last game he ever played. So he actually changed his plans and played junior college football because of that game. And me and my buddies, when we get together, we still talk about that game. I did a lot of research for this book. I would fly out to Los Angeles and rent a car and go up to Edwards. And my friend Pat Zhang actually worked on Edwards Air Force Base as an adult. His career was to work there as a civil servant. He was not a military guy, but he worked on the base, kind of ran a bunch of engineers on an engineering wing. And so we were all over his house one time and drinking beer, and the game came up. And it's funny, Pat looked at me almost as if he really believed that I had a time machine and was going to get in the time machine the next day. He was just joking, but he looked at me and he said, Doug, just tell me, catch the ball, Pat. Because if you remember, the ball came towards him and he batted it down. If he just would have caught it, it would have been an interception in the end zone, touchback, game over. We go on. But we are still not over it. And so, therefore, this whole mission of Desert High is for me to go back in time through November 1980 and change the outcome of that game. Now, I want to warn you that if you haven't read the book Desert High, or you're reading it and you haven't gotten to the chapter on Trona versus Desert, this is going to be a spoiler for you. You're going to hear some information that you don't know yet. So be warned, spoiler alert, coming up. It's a spoiler because if this is the playoffs and you're talking about Desert playing Trona, it's pretty easy to figure out we're talking about round 2. And Desert must have somehow found a way to change history and reverse the outcome of that game, which is no mean feat. You don't just go back in time and change a football game. You can't run out on the field. And what can you do? So the Air Force wisely puts me with an escort. Lieutenant Brandon Hall is a young officer who's assigned to stay with me as I am now, my adult self is back in time. They don't want me to go AWOL and go to Vegas and use my knowledge of the future to gamble and win earnings. They don't want me to take off to New York City and try to stop the John Lennon assassination, which is in the book. At one point in this book, the time machine, the whole mission is to go back in time, reverse the outcome of this game, and take the next time machine back. But what happens very conveniently for the main character is the time machine breaks down. The sealed bearings in the giant wooden box that's got magnets in it, magnetic forces spinning around at high velocity, are what breaks through the wormhole, the time-space continuum. That's how my time machine works in Desert High. But because the machine breaks down, I get to actually go see the following game, round 2 in Trona, California. And during that time, I'm tempted to go to New York to try to save John Lennon, because, I could maybe do it. But I have an escort, Brandon Hall. His assignment is to, keep me there. So, Trona, California, that is round 2 of the playoffs. Trona, the Trona Tornadoes, they were actually in the playoffs that year, and they went pretty far. They advanced far. They were ranked ahead of us in the rankings of the playoffs. Trona, California is a trip. The football field is made of sand. I kid you not. We went there when I was a sophomore as a junior varsity football player, me and my buddy Pat Zhang again. We watched that game from the bleachers because we were suspended for a couple games because we did something terrible the week before the game and we couldn't play. But we got to travel with the team, And sitting in the bleachers, I got to hear the cheerleaders cheer, kill, kill, blood makes the grass grow, kill, kill, blood makes the grass grow. See, in Trona, they mine borax and they produce sodium carbonate. And so it's really difficult to grow anything green. It's hard to grow grass there. So the high school football team plays on a sand field. It's like a giant beach. If you've ever run on the beach, you know how hard it is to get any traction because your feet sink down and they slip. And the players, one of my older classmates, Ron Clark, he was a running back, and he told me after a play, when I was on my back on the ground after a tackle, the Trona players would drop sand in my face. And my teammates told us that, yeah, when the linemen come off the line, they sling their hands up, so they're slinging sand in your face. And so you've got this mouthpiece with your spit mixed with all the sand from the Trona sand pit. It is a hostile environment. And get this, Robert McGowan, who was a varsity coach for Desert for many years, he was a coach when I was a freshman and sophomore and prior to that. He once said, I would rather fish without bait than play a football game in the Trona sand pit. But when he was getting along in life, he told Coach Love, Orban Love Sr., who was our athletic trainer and later athletic director at Desert High, Robert McGowan told him, when I die, I want to be cremated and I want my ashes buried in my plot next to my mother, along with a jar of sand from the Trona sand pit. So when Coach McGowan passed away, Coach Love gets on the phone with a Trona High School official and arranges to meet halfway. And they met, and the Trona official presented him with a jar of sand from the Trona football field. I kid you not, truth is stranger than fiction. This is why it was an easy choice to write Trona in, because what happened, again, going back to the spoiler alert, somehow Desert reverses the call, reverses the game. How do we do that? Well, first of all, Lieutenant Hall and I show up at the game early, and we pose as Bishop High School administrators to greet the refs as they arrive, and they carpool together, and we take them to where their dressing room is. And I'm just guessing that most dressing rooms for the refs are in the same place, kind of a little room, kind of a building behind one of the end zones. And sure enough, we picked the right place. But on the walk from the parking lot to that dressing room, I am talking to one of the refs, and I'm trying to ask him questions about time clock management, stopping the clock after a running play, and also about advancing a forward fumble or a fake fumble, and to watch out for that. You remember the Holy Roller with Ken Stabler and Dave Casper of the Raiders that scooped the ball along the ground and scored a touchdown to win the game? There's rules in place now to keep advancing a forward fumble. So back in time, I do my best to try to get in the refs' heads that to be careful and to watch out for clock management and fake forward fumbles and trick plays and stuff like that. But it's no use. Referees don't want to be a part of the game. They want to do their job, get in, get out. And so this guy, he's very polite and he's listening to me as I'm talking to him and asking questions, but he's just going one ear and out the other. And so I'm unsuccessful in overturning the game. So here I am, and me and Lieutenant Hall are watching the game from the visitor's sideline because we can't be, it's actually the home side. I guess Desert was a visitor of that game. Sorry for that detail mix-up. But we're watching it from the Mammoth side of the field because my adult self can't be seen by other Desert parents and Desert students because I might be recognizable. Even decades later, my facial features might look the same. And so watching the game from the opposing stands, and when it comes down to the fake fumble, oh my gosh, they score the touchdown, but they score 6 points, and they have to run a 2-point conversion to win the game. And what they did in November of 1980 is, in the midst of the Desert players being fuming mad and talking to the refs and trying to say, what just happened here? That's not wrong. That was a fake fumble, blah, blah, blah. Mammoth gets up there and runs the next play, and they run the option play, and nobody covers the pitch man, and Troy Rowan catches the pitch and runs into I remember he held the ball up with one of his hands, runs into the end zone with a victory touchdown signal in his hands, and they win the game. So back in time, in the book, it's after the fake fumble touchdown, but before the 2-point conversion. My adult self leaves the stands and runs to the end zone, the track that goes around the field. What do? Well, I'm not going to spoil everything for you. You're going to have to read the book to find out what I do. But double spoiler, we know that Desert somehow wins that game because you don't go to round 2 of the playoffs unless you win round 1. And so we go and play in Trona for round 2. And there's your behind the scenes look. It was so fun bringing Trona and the reality of that strange place into the book. You know, leading up to the Super Bowl about a decade ago, ESPN ran a short film about Trona because it's one of the most unusual high schools in the country because they play on sand. It's like playing football, tackle football on the beach. And so stay tuned for episode 4, where we talk about another scene, and you might find out in that episode, another spoiler, what happens with the Trona game. But I wanted to tell you about the book, Desert High. You can buy it at hm-press.square.site, and I'll throw that link up in the end credits here on the video. If you buy the book, you get a free Desert High wristband. It's got the scorpion on it, it's purple wristband, and a Desert High bumper sticker, football, time travel, and fantasy. And also, if you use a special discount coupon, Playoffs. Playoffs is the coupon code. When you're checking out, instead of paying $15, you enter in Playoffs in the coupon code, you get $5 off. So you get the book for $10. So join the discussion. Let us know in the comments, you know, if you went to high school at Trona or Desert or Mammoth or Bishop or in Southern California, you remember the CIF playoff system. If you remember Southern California in the 80s. My research, I was accurate when the time machine broke down. I went shopping, and there's a few items in their retail prices in the book are accurate according to 1980 prices. And there's a fun chapter where during this downtime of the time machine being broken because the sealed bearing is out of stock, the giant shipyards the Navy uses for these giant bearings, they're out of stock, and we have to wait. You know, so fortunately for me, the time machine breaks down. I get to go see my younger self play a second game of high school football in the playoffs, in a game that never really happened. So that's one of the joys of writing this chapter, is being able to make up a game that didn't happen and to write it as if it did happen. And that was so much fun. So anyway, join the discussion. Let us know what you think.